It's been a while. Um, what are we doing with discovery? And even if you have a product in the market, you have a product in the market, but remember, discovery is continuous. You don't stop doing discovery just because you have a product in the market. No. Remember the conversation we had about BlackBerry and why they're no longer in existence? Because their continuous discovery process fell off and they didn't do a good enough job of keeping their fingers on the pulse of what was going on with customers. So with products, with what do you call it? With discovery, product discovery, we're looking to validate the problem. You want to validate the customer, the market. You want to validate the solution, which is the product, and you also want to validate people's willingness to pay. And that's something that I want you to keep thinking about. And when you're doing this validation process, one of the first things that you want to think about is, you know what did we expect going into this process? It doesn't matter if it's a new feature, if it's a new customer base, if it's a pivot in your strategy, whatever that looks like. What did we expect is a question that you need to be asking yourselves, okay? As early stage companies. So if your hypothesis about the market, remember there are questions that you had, those questions turn into assumptions, or assumptions now turn into a hypothesis, you go and test. And your testing shows that you're wrong. You don't just say, okay, well, business is over. No, you learn, you pivot, and you iterate. Okay? That's what you do. You pivot and you learn and you iterate. And that's what you'll see most of the businesses out there that have done very well have been able to do this right. They test, they find out some stuff, and then they move on with them with what's next. They pivot away. Okay? So this was an exercise that we were going to do in a room. I will, given kind of the few numbers of people, and I think we're at a place where interaction is a little low. What we'll do is I'll just share this screen with you. This is something I wanted the teams to talk about, where they think they are right now. Are you at customer problem fit? Are you trying to find a customer that is having this problem that you've identified? So your job is to go and validate the customer and problem hypothesis that you've developed from your assumptions. Or are you at the stage where you feel like, you know what, we have a problem, we have a solution to that problem that will solve it for these users, right? And that's where you start to do customer interviews and some kind of low fidelity prototyping. And then, we talk about minimum viable product. I like to talk about very high fidelity prototypes, which you're seeing today with things like Lovable and Bolt. Vibe coding is allowing people to go very quickly to minimum, what I call high fidelity prototypes that you can now take out there to potentially early customers and use it to see, right, how people react, whether you can generate revenue, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, scaling means now you have a product that you can sell. Okay, so again, as I said, the exercise was meant to be for teams to actually get together and discuss where they find themselves in this equation, which is it customer problem fit? Is it problem solution fit? Is it minimum viable product? Or is it minimum sellable product? Again, if you have any comments, please put it in the chat. I am going to assume that, again, I keep reiterating this because I don't want it to be like we didn't have interaction points in this session. It just seems as if we don't. And so I'll just keep moving on. If anybody has a question, just raise your hand or put something in the chat and then we'll go. All right. So again, this was another really great breakout room exercise, but the reason I'm bringing this up was I bring it up because we're going to talk about prioritization. And the reason I'm talking about prioritization is it also is part of the discovery phase in trying to think about what problems to solve or what markets to chase or what things to do and what not to do. So this exercise, I don't know if folks want to do this, you can raise your hands and let me know. I can make it happen. If not, I'll maybe do this at another session where we have a little bit more interaction, okay? But the goal was to kind of show you the value of how you think when you're trying to make a choice between certain aspects of building your product. Okay. So we're talking about prioritization here. Right? Like, how do you make sure that you have the right heuristics to think about the right things, to do the right things, excuse me, to make the right choices, as opposed to trying to do everything? You know, you hear that thing where they say, oh, you're trying to boil the ocean. That is real. They try to do everything. You want to serve every customer, you want to solve every problem, you want to offer every solution, and you can't do that. And so the point of the exercise was to show how in a room of 4 or 5 people, you will see that different people will sequence things differently because of what priorities they have, not what the world is saying. Okay. I love this picture, you know, because whoever took this picture, you're there. That animal is actually about to, I don't know if it's eating the kid, but definitely the kid looks like they're in danger. But the focus is actually, let's get the picture before we do anything. And we're seeing a lot of that in real life these days, where priorities are all over the place. Yeah. Oh, you know, Steve Jobs, and everyone knows Steve Jobs. We talk about Steve Jobs all the time. And that's because he had some really great ways of thinking about things. And one of the great ways that he thought about things was the ability to say no. The ability to say no. You know, I have a great story about this guy. So when he was brought back to Apple, you know, he founded Apple, and then they brought in what they called a professional CEO and kicked him out. And then the professional CEO didn't do a good job of managing Apple. And at some point, they brought Steve Jobs back in. And by then, he had already invested a significant amount of money in a company called Pixar that, you know, is a movie company. No, actually, he built a company called Next, which was a computer company, very innovative. And then he also invested in Pixar. Pixar makes all these movies like Toy Story and The Incredibles and things like that. However, he was still in love with Apple. And so, you know, he actually sold Pixar to Disney and became the highest, the biggest investor in Disney. Actually, he made his money through Disney initially before Apple really made him the superstar that he is. So they bring him back to Apple, and he brings all these, all the senior managers, the VPs and above. And he brings them to a meeting, and, you know, they do all this work. And he says, oh, yeah, you know, these are, you know, what are our core strategies? What are the things that we're going to do? So, you know, they hash it out, you know, very important people. They're talking about all kinds of things and doing all kinds of stuff. And he says, okay, we're going to come up with our top 10 list. These are the things that are the top 10 most important things we have to do. So they, you know, do it in the room. They use a facilitator, and then they have the 10 things that they need to do. So he says to them, okay, so these are the 10 things, eh? They're like, yeah, looks good. Any adjustments? No, you know, we're good, right? He goes to the board, takes a marker from number 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. He crosses them out and says, we're not doing this stuff. Our focus is going to be on 1 and 2. That's it. And the people are looking at him like, wait a minute, what? But he said that's how you do hardcore prioritization. And there was probably some kind of a heuristic in his head. There's a methodology, I'm sure. But by the time all of them have come up with those 10, I'm sure they had gone through all kinds of exercises. And then what he did was he said, okay, these are the top 2. That is hardcore prioritization. And as folks who are building and you're trying to win your market, it is important that you are clear on what your strategies are. Okay. So what's a priority? A priority is something that is you consider more important than others. You know, look, you are dealing in a market where this is a major issue. Getting insurance is not a top priority that you're talking to. Is not when you say, okay, what's your priority right now? Insurance may not even be top 10, honestly. right? And so the question I would ask you is, why is that, right? Now, this is on the continent. Um, this is on the continent. If you go to other environments, actually getting insurance could actually make top five, right? I need to mute somebody. Okay, yes. Could actually make top five. But in the markets that we are operating on the continent, it is not top five. I don't think it's top 10. Okay. And even for some of these companies that we're talking about, some of the farmers that we're talking about, some of the folks that we think should get insurance, if you ask them and you do look, so what are your top priorities? I don't get the sense that, they'll tell you, oh yeah, this is top of mind for me. Okay. Now you can prove me wrong, but I've heard enough to be able to make that conclusion or draw that conclusion. So then prioritization is the ability to decide properly, right? This is decision making. So you need to be able to decide properly what are your top priorities, what are your low priorities, and so on and so forth. Okay. And so, again, as I said, this was meant to be interactive, but I do have a question for every single one of you to consider. And if some people, take this on, I would appreciate that. But when you go back to your teams today, I have two questions for you to consider when it comes to thinking of your priorities. The first one would be, what would be stupid for us not to do in the next 90 days? Like, think about that. That's part of my coaching. When I coach, I say, you're doing all this discovery work. You're trying to understand your market. You're trying to grow your market. You're doing all these things. You're out there hustling. And then you bring Chidi in to talk to your senior leadership team or to talk to your teams. And one of the questions I ask is, what would be stupid for us not to do in the next 90 days? In 90 days, that's 3 months. So that's what would be stupid for us not to do in the short term. 90 days is the length of a quarter. So many times that's how far you can reasonably think and plan ahead when you're growing quickly or you're hustling quickly, right? So you can ask yourself this question at the beginning of every quarter. So this is August, the next quarter starts in October. You can ask that question. What would be stupid for us not to do in the next 90 days? Okay, let me flip that question. What would be stupid for us to do? So the first one was not to do. But now the question is for us to do. Because many times you go and do some crazy stuff. You go and start, maybe it will be stupid for you to take that contract. Yes, it's 250,000. It looks good. It would infuse cash into your company, but it would detract you from the problem that you started this company to solve. Right? Unless you change your priorities and your priorities are no longer about that problem. Now it's just about making money. However, you articulate that and make sure that the team understands that so that they know what we signed up to solve the problem that you articulated when you hired us. Now you're telling us we need to go and do this stuff to raise money. I'll make the decision on whether I want to stay or not in order to continue with this company. Okay. So when we talk about prioritization, there's some tools. This is a tool that I use significantly. It's very simple, but it's this, and I'm sure I don't know how many of you have seen this Eisenhower decision matrix, but it's such a great tool, especially when you're in a room trying to understand your priorities. So it's kind of this dichotomy between urgent and important. What's important? Important is like, you know what? This is life or death for the company. Urgent means this needs to happen immediately. It has to be addressed immediately. So when you put those two together, then you have these 4 buckets, right? Let me go with the worst to the best. The worst is when first is not important and is not urgent. Please, let me tell you, even as a human being, as founders, as business people, but most importantly, just as an individual, this matrix, because I use it. If it's not important and it's not urgent, don't put it aside. Don't say I'll address it later. Just get rid of it. It's not urgent, it's not important. It doesn't matter. Okay, the next one is it is not important, but it's urgent, right? So what you need to do is, okay, it's not important, but it's urgent. Somebody needs it done. Find somebody else to do it. Delegate it. Maybe you find a partner that can help you do that piece. You find a strategic partner, right? But it's not for you to do. Somebody else should do it, right? Okay, the next one is it is important. This is important. It's important, but it's not urgent. That means it's not critical. So you can schedule a time to do it. It's important, but it's not urgent, right? So, for instance, you're about to fly. You're flying to. All of you are flying to Lusaka. I hope in about 2 months. Yeah, you need to get a visa if you have to. Well, that's important, but it's not urgent right now. So you schedule a time to go take care of your visa. Okay, but the key is that when we ask the question, what would be stupid for us to do or not do? That's important versus urgent. It is important and it is urgent. You do it now. It is important and it is urgent. You do it now. So that's one. I love this. It's very simple. Okay. Another one that I use is efficiency versus effectiveness, right? So the thing about efficiency and effectiveness is everybody's like, oh, we need to increase our efficiency, and efficiency is always about doing things right. So that's it. You're doing things right, and when you're doing things right, you're efficient. But I like to tell people that being efficient doesn't mean that you're doing good things, right? Because when you're being efficient at driving badly, that means people will suffer. Do you know there are some very efficient assassins, very efficient murderers, very efficient? You see what I'm saying, right? Efficiency is not just is really just focused on you're doing things right. I like to use effectiveness. I'm more about being effective, which is that you're doing the right things. Now, if you're efficient and effective, that is also another way to think about how you prioritize the things that you do, which is being in the green space. You're effective, you're doing the right things, and you're doing it in the right way. Okay? When you get to a place where you start to kind of drive being inefficient and being ineffective, these other three start to get into place. And you need to find a way to make sure that you're in this effective and efficient space. Okay? Talon, don't worry, I'll get to you in a quick second. I want to finish this piece and then go. So this is just something I like to share this. You want to make sure that you know what your must-dos are, and your must-dos must be above bar when it comes to your like-to-dos. You take care of your must-dos before you start thinking of your like-to-dos, okay? And then finally, it's all about time too, how you manage your time. Okay, don't get distracted. Do not get distracted. Don't mistake possibilities for probabilities. Anything is possible, right? But it's what is probable that you want to focus on. Weigh everything in terms of likelihood, right? In terms of effort, and then prioritize. So if you can sort out your probabilities from possibilities, again, oh, it's possible. Yeah, that's fine. It's possible, but you can't even measure that possibility. But probability, you can actually go out there and say, okay, the probability of us being successful with this is high, right? That's the practical thinking that we want. It's thinkers, it's intellectuals that get lost in the cloud of possibility. Hey, it's possible. No, you want probabilities. That there's numbers to probabilities. Where it shows people, that's statistics, actuarials, right? That's where we play probabilities as opposed to possibilities. Okay. And then finally, this is my saying: you simplify, 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 right? Get rid of irrelevant details in your prioritization. You're doing discovery work. You're trying to understand your customer. You're trying to understand the problem that they have. You're trying to understand whether your solution is the right one for them. Stop wasting time in irrelevant details. Stay focused on getting the right information, increasing your probabilities, right? Increase your believability. And also make sure you get help in prioritize. Okay. All right. I'm going to stop here. Things are moving fast because the interaction is out. So I'm going to actually finish this session very, very, very early. All right. Talent, go ahead. You have the mic.
Thanks, Kidi, for some hard-hitting insights today. I'm already thinking about a lot of things. Um, but I just want to come back to the Eisenhower decision matrix, because one of the things that affects us as a startup is a lot of agent issues that may not be very important, right? So the matrix is suggesting that we have to delegate to other people. But I guess that's where the biggest challenge comes, finding someone whom you can delegate to, who is able to do that task quite efficiently, but also as quickly as possible. So I think that's one of the challenges we are facing in our lean startup, where we don't have a lot of resources. We don't even have a lot of people. So delegation means maybe you have to pay someone. And again, you are not so sure if they are going to do the task as urgently as possible. So how do we deal with such a situation whereby we have a lot of urgent tasks um, that are not so important, but we also have difficulties in delegating those same tasks to other people?
Yeah, Talent, that's a great question. And again, it's all about how you define what's important, what's urgent, what's critical. In my work as a product manager and then a product leader, and now as a product coach and a product whatever I am, there's a ruthlessness to prioritization. In fact, that's even translated into my life. Okay, where you have to get to a place where you understand what you can do and what you can't do. But you also have to be honest about what's important and what's not important. Because you just said, well, these things are they're not important, but they're critical, right? Or they matter, right? So if they do matter, then that tells me that they're important, right? But if you're saying that these are things that you kind of need or they need to be done now in order for certain things to work for you, then I don't think the issue is urgency. I think the issue is how important it is. Okay. So that becomes also part of your exercises to understand how do you define important and how do you define urgent? Because if it is not important, then you're either delegating or you're getting rid of it. If it is not urgent, then you're trying to decide, okay, do I do it another time or do I eliminate it? It is only when there is that, oh, this is important and is urgent. That's when you start to really hustle to make things happen. Okay. So again, for me, it's not that things that are not important shouldn't get done. It just means that it's not important to you. So that means somebody else has to get it done. Right. But for instance, if it's something that's really that critical to you, you make it happen one way or the other. Okay. So that's why, sometimes even in hiring processes, you'll see today, actually, a lot of companies are now starting to use this kind of a matrix to think about how to hire people in the day of AI, right? Yes, this is urgent work that needs to be done, but it's not that important for us right now. You know what? Use AI, let the AI take care of it. But, we need the minds, the skills, the experience, and we need it now. Hire those people immediately. This is important, but we're not going to need to do this in 12 months. Okay, when the time comes, we'll cross that bridge. We'll find a way to do it. I don't know if that helps. Talent. Again, it's really about how you define things. You need to be very clear about that.
Yeah, no, it helps, Chidi. Thank you so much. If I can maybe just come back to one comment that I put into the chat.
Oh yeah, please go ahead. I didn't see it, so go ahead.
Yeah. So again, it's coming back to the issue of maybe prioritization, you know. So I was commenting on the issue of first principles, um, which is something that I really liked because I didn't have that under my radar. So one of the things that we now see is this, you know, idea of wanting to develop an app or wanting to develop the next digital solution, and maybe not prioritizing the first principles of the business idea of insurance, as an example. Um, so the pressure is also not coming just from us as startups only. You see it even from investors. You see it even from accelerator program, incubators. They are always trying to ask you the question, where
Himala.
exactly, exactly. So you have described all this. It's a very good model. Which is really answering to the first principles of insurance. But then they ask you, so where is your tech platform? Where is your digital solution? So are we losing the focus here? Are we prioritizing maybe the things that are not so important?
Yeah. That's it. Talent, this is a very important question that you're asking, right? And then, look, investors are a very interesting segment of this problem solving equation. Or let me say variable, because they're not a constant. They're a variable in the equation of I need to build something that will solve a problem. And so if you find yourself prioritizing for the investor, yes, you're going to run into trouble. I said this to you back in the day. I think second session, I said the customer is the one with the problem, not the investor. And as a founder, you have to be able to find a place where you can say to an investor, we are not aligned, unfortunately, in the vision. You're just not, we don't think that you're right for us. Do you know how many founders do that and do it well? You go to an investor say to you, oh, and you say, you know what, okay, your money is not good for me because you're going to come in here now and start focusing me away from what needs to happen. Oh, where's your app? Why don't you ask me what's the evidence that this is a problem that people are willing to pay for? And that we're willing to help you fund the development of the solution to that problem. That's the coaching that, when I work with accelerators and I work with, VCs sometimes, that's what I said, look, stop asking them about the tech. That doesn't mean anything, especially in this day and age of AI. All I have to do is just look at your solution, go into Lovable, vibe code that thing, and I have the same app. Same app. It looks the same way. I can even take pictures of your app, right? Take them, copy paste into my vibe coder. Say, okay, I want you to create the same thing. You know what it will do? It will create the same thing. But the difference between me and you is that you understand the problem fundamentally. That you've first principles, you've gone there and you've asked the questions. We know what the facts are, we know what the assumptions are, we've tested the hypotheses, and we know what we know. We have evidence. So you went and built a solution based off of evidence. So when you go to an investor and the investor is asking you for your tech, then my assumption is a couple of things. First is either that investor does not belong in the same room with you, or number two is you're talking to an investor that is not at the level, you're not at the level of where the investor is, which is you're coming to them trying to get money. Meanwhile, they're looking to invest already scaled solutions. They're looking for like solutions that there's problem solution fit is there, problem market fit is there. They just want to make sure that the solution is something that is viable, right? So again, I've gotten to a place in my life that if I was pitching to an investor, I'm not pitching to you. I'm explaining what I'm doing. I have a vision. If you're not aligned with my vision, then we're not going to talk. And if I'm asking you for money right now, it's not out of desperation. That's the other thing for my founders on this call. You do not raise money out of desperation. When you do that, you will take any kind of money. Okay. So talent, you can tell that you took me into my bully pulpit. I became Pastor Chidi, there. Um,
go deeper, Pastor.
and the other thing is, when you talk about first principles, look, I will challenge every single startup and whoever is watching this right now, right? I will challenge you to go to your boardroom or to your conference room, sit down with your team and do this exercise on first principles. What are the first what questions, what are the fundamentals of the business we're in, and what assumptions are we making? What do we know to be true? You will see, you'll see people coming in, they'll say, oh yeah, people will never pay above $5 a month for insurance. That to be true. Like, oh, really? You do? How do you know that? Because I wouldn't pay $5 a month. Oh, so based off of that, that's how you're going to now decide that the rest of the world wouldn't pay $5. How do we know that? We don't know that. So I really wanted to, and I wish there was more people here because this for me was a fundamental session. I wanted to come at you guys and interact. I wanted to send you to breakout rooms and interact, right? But we'll do that another time. Okay. Are there any other questions before I keep going? All right. I'm going to keep going. Okay. So we talked about prioritization, and again, prioritization is key as you think about the things that you're going to do as you do discovery. Now, let me introduce something else in terms of, I talked about discovery and prototyping. Okay, if you're building prototypes, what risks are you trying to mitigate, right? What are you trying to handle right here? Before I continue with this, I just saw, Celeste said something about startups tremble too much in front of investors. And yes, I understand that. And especially, if you haven't had experience building. So you notice that people who have done startups before, sold them or shut them down, and then they try to raise again, you notice that they're very different when they're raising money. Now they realize that I don't need to tremble. So Celeste, there's nothing to tremble about. Again, you know the kind of money you're looking for. You know why. And many times you don't even have to raise money to do the things that you think you need to do. I need to hire, somebody told you that you need to hire 3 software developers. I need to go and acquire property to do this. Okay. Are you sure? Must you acquire property? Right? There are questions you need to ask before you go into the investor, because you need to be in control of that conversation, not the investor. And investors love startup founders who do not tremble in front of them. You have a founder that pushes back on them. The person says, I don't think that this is a viable. You say, with all due respect, and my sense is that you're not going to invest in me. So I'll just tell you that I disagree with you. And let me explain why. We have evidence, and we have evidence to back up our disagreement. Or we have evidence that says that we're in the right place. It just seems like maybe your investment philosophy and our approach to this maybe don't match, right? You'll see. Investors, they have a way of just being like, oh, okay, that's interesting, So, anyways, we can talk about that. I also do pitch coaching. I do pitch coaching, and I also do fundraising coaching. And I don't say that as that's not a sell. It's just you can tell that there's just some key pieces for you to keep in mind as you go into a place to get money. All right, so I was talking about prototyping. The prototypes, you build a prototype, or when you're testing a new feature that you're bringing into the equation, there are 4 things for you to think about, right? 4 fundamental questions. First, or not first, number one. You know what? Just the first one I'll mention is this thing valuable? Because, look, we're going to build, we believe, we have a hypothesis that users will see value in purchasing micro travel insurance in order to protect certain aspects of the trip, but not the entire trip. You need something that will show that actually people will pay for that actual product or that solution that you're thinking about. So that's number one, right? Actually, I think I went ahead of myself. I'm sorry. But will customers buy this? You know, there are people who give their product out for free and people say, oh my God, this product is great. Then what happens? You put a price on it and they run. I see that too. Oh, on the continent, I see that too many times. Startups find a way to make it cheap or not, no price. And then at some point you have to start generating revenue. You want to tell your customers not to pay for it, right? No, you have to test that at the beginning. It's best to get 1,000 paying customers than a million paying customers, right? So your prototype should be thinking about how do you test value, right? Do they love the product? That's a qualitative conversation. How well does your proposed solution solve the underlying problem? That's something you need to know. Next is, are you able to build this thing? This team that I have, can build it? Do you have the skills? Do you have the money? Well, the reason, not money. There's not money. That's not the word. It's the skills, resources, and time. Okay. I'll keep going back to WhatsApp. How many people are using WhatsApp on this platform? How many? Just raise your hand. If you're not using WhatsApp, don't raise your hand. Right? Oh, well, again, that's okay. I see, I know people are using WhatsApp. Do you know how many people they had on the team when they sold it to Facebook for $19 billion? They built that with 20 engineers. 20 engineers. The team was so lean. So imagine they could build WhatsApp. They had the skills, they had the time, and they had the resources. They didn't need to go raise all kinds of money. And they were able to build such a, till today, all of us are, we are stuck on WhatsApp because those guys not only were able to figure out how we would use it, how we would find value in it, but also the fact that they could build it. You talk about usable. This is where most of our prototyping and our discovery testing happens, is usability. Can people use it? WhatsApp. Can people use WhatsApp? How easy is WhatsApp? Older people, my uncle, in the village right now, my uncle's about maybe, I don't know, 77, no, 80. Actually, he just did his 80th birthday. 80. If you see the way he uses WhatsApp, just like that, call, video, this, that. It's usable. Okay? So your discovery should be able to say, but even before you build it, this is something that will be usable. That should be, again, priority. Usability should be important and urgent for you to deliver to your customer. And finally, viability. This is where investors, this is where investors ask you about your business model and they ask you about your projections. And first things first, projections are a pipe dream. I can project whatever I want to project. I can make up what I want to. At the end of the day, it's unit economics. That's what we're talking. Unit economics. What is a customer willing to pay for, and how much do they pay for it? Is this good for our business? Is this something that we actually can build a thriving, profitable business upon? So we have the context of, people, pricing, volume, of course. But then ultimately, can you acquire customers? Can you keep those customers? Can you have them bring other customers in to use your product? They'll say, shut up and take my money, or shut up and take my data, or whatever it is that they have to give you in order for you to build a business. That's what we're doing with this concept of the four main things that you're looking at when you're kind of doing discovery, when you're building products, even if you're grown, if you're a growth company, you're grown, you're doing well. As you add features, as you add markets, you're asking these same questions. It never ends. Okay. All right. Any questions for me on this? Questions?
Hi, Chide. Tawanda
Yes.
here.
Hey, Tawanda, what's up?
Yeah, so no, nothing much. Sorry, today I'm connecting out of office, so it's a bit noisy where I am. Yeah, so it's just for me, it's just a comment. I agree with you that investors shouldn't have the last say or change our models, without maybe a fierce pushback. However, I'm not so sure the experience with the other countries, but in Zimbabwean context, you realize that we have a very thin interest from most funders. So that leaves us with very few interested parties. So I've seen that you also need to be flexible in as much as you have the final say, on the trajectory of your roadmap. Sometimes listening into their questions is sometimes harmless. In most cases, I've seen that it is very beneficial, especially if you have done your job in terms of understanding what it is they invest in and how they invest their money. So I've seen, for me personally, I've seen that, it always comes with positives. So I don't think we should be rigid, and also knowing in my case that the funnel for funding is very, very thin for funding partners. So, just, maybe just throwing some caution to the wind around how hard it can then be, in terms of some of these areas. Where I've seen also maybe as a good pushback is to say, if we proceed with a certain solution, would the investor then look at maybe footing the bill to actually then achieve certain criteria that they have. So the most common one is gender mainstreaming, or to have numerous policies around child labor protection and all of that. So I often push back and say, we want to achieve this, but you will have to fund it. You have to foot that, budget line so that we can be able to not divert the little we have to somewhat would call, using the Hassenhoff decision matrix, what is just perhaps important but not urgent. So that's my contribution. Yeah.
Yeah, and Tawanda, I hear you, and I don't think we're necessarily saying different things. Although, the one thing I would say, there's no rigidity to what I'm saying, right? What I am saying is, even in an environment like Zim, where there's, as you said, thin funding resources, you can't compromise your business in order to fit into the investor's wheelhouse. Listen, if that's what you're going to do, then why are you even here, right? Because that's easy, right? Oh, investor, what do you want to fund? I want to fund this. Okay, I'll make the adjustment, right? And if something is not in your, if there's a line item that's not on your business, if there's something that's not on your business line items, and they are saying it needs to be on your business line item in order for them to invest in you, you also have to question. Okay, we came in, we didn't have that on our P&L, and then all of a sudden these guys are saying, in order for us to invest in you, this needs to be on your P&L. again, we're negotiators here. I know the people on this call are very skilled negotiators. And as a negotiator, is that a win-win? Are you winning if you find yourself in that situation? So I'm not saying don't go and get investment. That's not what it, people, the investment picture on the continent is already dire. So for people who need resources, why would I say don't get resources? However, I am saying that if the investment is, if that desperation, it's like a lion that can smell fear or desperation, from its prey. Investors are very good at that, right? Is they come in and they say, okay, we have the upper hand. And all I'm saying is you should take as much control of that conversation as possible and make sure that you use first principles thinking. You've done the discovery. You have evidence. You know the problem that you want to solve. The worst thing that will happen to you, and just take it from me, as somebody who built a company and then we took money to solve a different problem, and I don't have that company anymore today. It died, right? So I speak from experience. You want to make sure that you are not compromising your vision and that you are not making too many shifts in order to fit the profile of a venture that investor wants to invest in. Look, a lot of VCs would disagree with me, and we disagree with each other all the time, right? Oh, we have a philosophy, Chidi, and I'm like, yeah, that's fine, but are you really helping the company? This is very interesting. I was just before this call. One of the reasons I came in maybe 2 minutes late was I was actually on a board meeting with one of my portfolio companies, right? And the founder, man, I've been with her for almost 10 years now. She is still trying to get her Series A. Series A. She was invested in seed financing, was led by Serena Williams, right? And Serena Williams was very happy to invest in her. I won't tell you what her business is, but Serena Williams has one of the more high-profile investment companies here, and loved it, loved the idea. But the founder actually started making different shifts here and there when Serena Williams and her team kept telling her, okay, maybe you should do this, maybe you should do that. And man, it's been a rough 2 years. Serena Williams is no longer part of the equation. They've left. And meanwhile, we are here, the board, left holding the board because, holding the bag, because the decisions that were made, and we take responsibility, was that we shifted in order to be able to bring a big name like Serena Williams into the equation. So Tawanda, I hear you, right? I understand. We're building here, we're hustling, we're trying to get this thing done. But I still don't believe that now you have to find let me say it this way. Just don't compromise too much, because it comes back to haunt you. And you hear that from founders who have gone through this, and they look back and they're like, wow, maybe I should have stuck to my guns a little bit more. Okay. And unfortunately, it's becoming too prevalent on the continent. I have other stories about startups here in Africa, that have they've taken a beating because of the conversations with not conversations, but the interactions with investors. Okay. Yes, Cavalli. And actually, guys, let me say something. I don't want this conversation to be just about funding, because that's a different conversation. I'm sure there are even people that are slated to talk to you about funding. So we can go back and forth on funding. That's a big issue. I think the point that I was making with talent was to make sure that we are focused on the fact that our discovery, when you go to first principles, or when you do discovery, you have evidence that allows you to have conversations with the right types of stakeholders and partners, the people who will help you solve that problem, including investors. Okay. All right. Who raised their hand? Was Cavalli? Yeah, Cavalli, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I think from my experience, what I what I see playing into this investor conversation, although I know you've said that we move away from that, is when you're very clear on who your customer is and you have a product that has a buying customer and you understand the problem, you've provided the solution and the solution is accepted. I found it easy because I've been involved in something, that is successful to a good degree. Then the investor, you just say, this is what works. Yes, I hear you. I can hear what you're proposing, but that doesn't align with what is working. So it's very easy to say no, and we have said no a few times. But when I look at what we are working in, with at Nomad Pro, because we are still struggling with that, the customer, the problem, I guess it's more difficult to have a good pushback to an investor in a situation like the one we are in at Nomad Pro. So it's going back to really what problem are we addressing and do we have a paying customer? Because in the first company I'm referring to, that was very clear for over a period of 2 years. So it was very easy to say, no, we don't want this because it's not going to work for us. That's what I would like to comment. Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you for that, Cavalli. And just to end, just to kind of bookend the conversation, the point you're making is very important, because even the thing about raising money when you are trying to see, raising money these days is very interesting. So you're raising money. In fact, I just saw a call for ideas. We will fund ideas. That's a different type of investor. They cannot. If you're funding ideas, then you don't have. As an investor, you need to not have an opinion. You just leave them alone. What's your idea? We like the idea. Okay, that's good. All right, go and try and make it happen. Then you start getting to pre-seed and seed financing, right? Where, as Cavalli said, you're still trying to make sure that there's something here, right? And you're asking for funding to make that happen. Again, the investor has significant advantage there. But when you get to a place where you have evidence, then you're in a much better place to push back. And, again, we can have this conversation another time. I think this is is a pervasive issue, and it's something that we need to be clear about. Okay. Any other questions for me? Okay, let me ask, before I get into this particular part of the conversation, I need to make sure I verify something. How many of you, just put in the chat if you're willing to, I hope we can get some good responses. How many of you actually have a product in market right now? Like you have some customers using it. You're not just idea. How many of you are, have a product in market? If we can see a show of hands, some kind of indication. I see 3. Anybody else? Okay, then if you don't have a product to market, what's, in your chat, can you say what you do? Is it you're still working on your idea or you're doing discovery to figure out what the solution is? Where are you in terms of your company right now? Okay, so given the responses that I've seen, I think it's about 40% of the people in the room have responded. I would say that it sounds like folks have their solutions, right? You already have a solution in market. Okay. I'm going to bring up something I want you to think about even as you're thinking of discovery. This may be more for companies that have found product market fit, but I wanted to introduce this, and I hope you don't get too confused. There's this concept of a flywheel. This is a flywheel, right? So it's kind of going around and around and around. Sometimes you'll see another wheel that's connected to it so that as that wheel is moving, it's also making that flywheel. So the 2 flywheels going together, right? Flywheels are very important as a way to justify, as a way to justify, no, that's not the right word, as a way to show that you have momentum in building your market and building a business. Is this something that you would deal with in discovery? Yes, if you have a product, then you need to start thinking about what your flywheels will look like. Okay. So flywheels essentially allow you to get positive feedback loops, right? That help you build momentum. And then as you make incremental efforts, that momentum keeps feeding itself. Okay. Just bear with me. If you have any questions, let me know. So essentially, we're saying, what are the good things that you will do that will lead to more good things to happen? So let's watch this video. I'm going to put this video on. This is Amazon, and I wish I had a video that I could use for an African company, but I will make this case. I say this every time I do these sessions for my continent is we don't have content. We just don't. People say, Chidi, you should make that content. I've said I've only built one or two companies, and they didn't even they these are companies that don't exist anymore. So we need to see content around this stuff in Africa, and I'm hoping that as you build, you allow us, those of us who are looking to build that content, to come and talk to you about your failures, about your flywheels, about your decision making. We need more transparency. Tawanda, just as a side, Strive Masiwa, very well known billionaire. His name is all over the place. We know he is one of our superstars. I have beef with Strive. I have beef with him. And my beef is he's written a lot of great LinkedIn posts. I've seen some articles. We need books. We need him we need a documentary. We need the stories. For his company, right? What are the flywheels? We just need this information. Dangote, Mo Ibrahim, who else? Flutterwave, all these companies, we need stories. That's the way, when we do this stuff, I don't have to use Amazon or Steve Jobs. I can talk about these other. That's because those guys they took notes and shared it with the rest of the world, right? On the continent, we're just not transparent about our stuff. And that stuff is not helping us. We need more transparency. It's not about going on stage and doing a 30-minute or 40-minute panel and that's it. No, we need books. We need stories, And so anyways, the reason I say that is because I have to show this video and it's with Amazon. And so I hope this helps us have this conversation around flywheels. Let me see. Here we go.
This is the Amazon Flywheel, also known internally at Amazon as the virtuous cycle. It's the founding model for growth of the Amazon marketplace. By opening up its marketplace to third-party sellers, Amazon significantly increases its product selection and, in turn, improves the experience for Amazon customers. This great customer experience drives more customers to Amazon, which motivates more third-party sellers to join the marketplace, adding more new products, which again improves the customer experience. At the same time, more sellers means more competition. This competition forces lower product prices, which further improves the customer experience, leading to more customers and sales. The platform's growth also creates economies of scope and scale, leading to lower overall transactional costs for Amazon, savings that Amazon passes on to consumers by driving prices even lower, further improving customer experience. These factors continually feed each other and drive growth, all of which feeds customer experience, traffic, and sales. While Amazon's flywheel works well for Amazon and its customers, it creates a significant challenge for brands. Amazon's hands-off approach results in huge numbers of unauthorized resellers offering your branded products on
Oops. Okay, sorry about that. But I don't know if you caught the gist of what they were saying there. Amazon is able to create this momentum in the way they've built their platform. you have a lot of sellers. You bring a lot of sellers, and with a lot of sellers, that means that you have variety. With variety, that brings a lot of customers. With customers, that means people can sell more, and then you can have lower prices, and so on. And you see that virtuous cycle continue to play out. And again, as I said, I don't want to introduce too much complexity, but I thought this was a very important part of the equation. And I want you as a cohort to keep this in mind. Please I don't want to hear people saying, oh, we're so focused on what our flywheels are. This is really for you to keep in mind, especially as you talk to regulators and potential partners, what does your flywheel look like? So these are different flavors of flywheels. The direct network effect is a flywheel that we all know, right? The more users you have, the more value for existing users. So that's like a social media platform, right? Social media platform like Facebook or Instagram or even WhatsApp does not work if there are not enough people. So WhatsApp, the way that it was able to build this flywheel was the more users on WhatsApp, the more value for those of us who are already on WhatsApp, right? So that's a flywheel. There's one of economies of scale, right? So what you do is the more sales volume that you have on your platform or that you build through your platform, right? The lower your fixed cost per unit goes. And if your fixed costs go down, then you lower your prices and you sell more volume, and that also lowers your cost, and then you lower your prices and you keep going, right? For many of you that are doing marketplaces, right? Two-sided marketplaces, you have a two-sided network effect. The more users you have or the more buyers you have, the more suppliers and the more developers you have, your value proposition to both sides increases, and then more users come in or more buyers come in, and the more suppliers you have, and so on and so forth. There's so many others. Switching costs. I like switching costs because if you build I think it was Talent that was saying, investors are asking, well, what is your tech? Well, the reason they're asking that is because it could be a way for you to increase the switching costs of your customer. And how do you build that flywheel? The customer integrates your product, right? They're locked in. And because they're locked in, there's less competition for their attention. And because there's less competition, it's easier for you to now go and get more customers. You integrate the product, they're locked in, and so on and so forth, right? So I bring this up because flywheels are a critical part of the conversation for you as a founder, as a venture, to make sure that you understand what your acceleration, I call it accelerant. What are your accelerants, right? That will help you grow, even as an early stage company. What are the accelerants you should be looking for that would allow you to really explode as a company? How do you build your defenses? The moat. I know you're all startups, so you know what a moat is essentially how do you widen that moat to make it very difficult for competitors to come in and essentially steal your business, right? And then, the flywheel is also a way for you to understand, okay, what competitive advantages do you have, and how are they force multiplied, right? Across the board. So, one of the things about flywheels, is you want to make sure you understand your feedback loops, right? And so these feedback loops give you some understanding on what the limiting factors can be. So again, switching costs, right? So it's very capable that if your flywheel is really moving really well, it becomes easier actually for folks to leave because your product quality has slipped and you're not necessarily able to keep them as long as possible, right? And in fact, what I'll do is let me just leave this slide alone, right? I think the focus was this part, was just thinking about as you do discovery, as you think about prototyping, is you're even prototyping what those accelerants are. You're prototyping whether this is a way for you to build the defense into the defensive aspects into your business model and your business strategy, your product strategy, and how you force multiply the competitive advantages you have. So, for instance, Tawanda is in Zimbabwe, and if he's the only one that's doing what he does, in Zimbabwe, then part of discovery is to see how to make sure that you're able to force multiply that competitive advantage so that it increases the momentum of your flywheel. Okay. Let me see. Let's look at Google's flywheel. This is a very interesting one. At the core of Google is just users, right? Google has always operated under the concept of the more users that are searching, the more users that are using the products, the more we get advertising revenue and we're able to get more data, right? So you start with more users, right? You get more data, better data that's improving the algorithm, right? And then the search performance is much better, and then you get more users, right? But in addition to that, when you have better search performance, right? Then now your brand is seen as where you're going to get the best results when you're searching. And because of that association with the brand, it's cheaper, to find the best results. And then people use it more and more, and then you get more users. So you see how there's like two flywheels there, right? That are kind of pushing each other, centered around more users. So that's something for you to think about as we go along. And I'm very willing to talk to you one-on-one about this as part of your thinking as you go into your work. Okay. So this is actually the end of my presentation. I don't really have that much more to speak on. And so I'm very wide open to questions. Let me say it this way. We talked about discovery, right? Well, first things first was the first principles of insurance and how discovery, from a product discovery aspect, the things you should be thinking about. Very critical, right? Then we got into prioritization, and we got in, and this is all part of your discovery conversation. We got into prioritization, and then we also got into how prototyping and discovery helps you mitigate the four risks of viability, feasibility, usability, and value. And then I ended with this conversation around flywheels because it's something you have to think about. Like, what are your momentum drivers? What are your accelerants, right? What are your defenders? Okay, today, if anybody's trying to fight WhatsApp, God bless you, right? Because that thing is so dominant. So you're coming in, the brute that WhatsApp has is the amount of users. Basically, switching costs, that's another one, right? So I hope this was a good session for you. And, again, I'm open to questions. Just let me know what you're thinking. Let's not talk about funding because clearly that's one that everybody is very concerned about. And I'm sure there are people who are better suited to really get into the dynamics of funding. But I'm open to questions.
So Chide, I think it will be good to so it's Tawanda here, Chide.
I see. I recognize the voice.
Okay. It would be good to get an example of a real African company, as you rightly said it, so that we or maybe not just African company, but a small business.
Yes. Yes.
So that we can be able to understand the flywheel. To relate to the flywheel effect. I'm looking at what are the ingredients. So it maybe when you share the presentation, you might want to put some footnotes on, what are the ingredients of a flywheel effect. What are the I hope you get what I'm trying to say. What are the structural points that we have to look at in order for us to define our virtuous cycle?
Yes, 100%. So I think you're calling us something, kind of a flaw in my system that I should address, which is, I've done this flywheel thing for so long. I should have developed some more flywheels for the continent. And like you said, small companies, right? because I'm thinking, so let me give you an example. And maybe, actually, I'm going to ask the crew to help me out. And let's think about the flywheel for this specific company. There's a sauce, a chili sauce in Rwanda called Akabanga sauce. There's this guy who essentially just started from home and built this business around Akabanga sauce. I don't know how many people have used Akabanga. If you don't know Akabanga, tell your Rwandan family to send you some Akabanga sauce, and you will absolutely 100% understand why that Akabanga sauce is one of the biggest exports from Rwanda, because that is a wonderful sauce. So when you go to Kigali, you'll see many people have the sauce. You go to lunch with a senior executive. They serve them their food, and you see them open her purse, and she pulls out the small Akabanga bottle, and she pours it on it. Right? I've seen many West Africans, Nigerians, Cameroonians, Ghanaians. They go to Kigali and they say, hey, this food is not spicy enough. Do you have any chili? They bring the Akabanga sauce, they put the Akabanga sauce on, and they leave the country with boxes of Akabanga sauce. What do you think the flywheel looks like for that company? So it's, he's doing extremely well. I wouldn't say he's a multinational, but he's definitely going beyond what I would say a small company. I'll say, medium-sized company. Can anybody, let's do quick exercise. What do you think the flywheel will look like for that? Tawanda, why don't you take a crack at it? First, what's the first part? What would be the first? Yeah. What would be the first part of the flywheel that gets the momentum going?
Yeah. I think it's the users.
It's the users.
I'll put the users there. I would also put, because once you have a product being used at that level, it means that even you can start doing switching costs as well, because the exposure that's coming, I'm imagining the intimate dining tables where this product then get discussed is completely different from sometimes the other environments, So I'll that's what I would think of at the top of my head at the moment.
Okay, so he's saying the customers who are buying the Akabanga sauce, that's the first, right? They have to buy it. Okay, so Akabanga sauce, it will be the customers. All right, can anybody suggest what would be the next part of that flywheel? And it does, look, this flywheel doesn't have to have in more than 2 or 3 components. So it seems like there's a suggestion of the number of customers here. That's one of the keys. Anybody else? Kamari, you used Akabanga sauce. Talk to me. What would you think would be the next piece? What else would you put in the flywheel?
The focus they have on the product and the consistency of that product.
So the product,
the consistency in what the product itself, and the consistency of what they produce over the years. I think I came across it, I don't know, more than 15 years ago, and it's exactly the same.
It hasn't changed.
It's just as
hasn't changed.
Yes, it's just as potent as it was. Yes.
Okay, so we have users and then quality. Let's get one more in there. What else? Anybody else? Talent. What do you think?
I'm still thinking.
Yeah. That's okay.
So Chide, I would buttress my thinking that the users are at the core of it. Because, you know, sometimes it's all about changing people's habits. And I feel that the user there is very critical to having that habit, you know, to say you can actually walk around with a tin of this sauce, you know, and, you know, be comfortable to take it out of your jacket or your, so really habits really become, perhaps, I don't know if it can be a component, but it tied to the human behavior there. So the user is still very critical for me.
Yeah. So I hear you, and yes, that buttresses really anchors the user there. I see. How do Tigist? Tigist. I don't want to mess up your name, and so you haven't really corrected properly. You can even write it out the way you say it. But she says she gives a very good point. She says the market is also a part of the flywheel, and I see a case there. So if you think about it, let's start with Tawanda. Tawanda says, you know, at the users is there. Cavalli says product quality. Tejas is saying market. I'm thinking, let me just talk about brand equity, right? Let me just flip that into brand equity. So if you think about how they build momentum, I would even say the quality of the product is, you know, Tawanda, let me just, again, we could have 10 different answers here. What I'm thinking at the core is the product quality. It is such a great product, right? So they have this product, maybe it's the process that they use to acquire and develop the product. So that's what Cavalli is getting into, right? And because of that, it establishes a brand that is associated with quality, right? So now the flywheel is starting to move. And the more that, as they have that brand equity, they get users. The more users they get, the more that product quality is, you know, see, so that's the thing about it. See, so that's the fun about this stuff. So because I'm thinking, okay, maybe the users, the more users you have, the more brand equity you have. The more brand equity you have, the more your product quality is recognized. The more your product quality is recognized, the more users you have. The more I'm talking, the more I'm realizing that maybe that product quality and the brand equity should be together, right? Because it seems like they're tied to each other. So the more users they have, the more brand equity they have. The more brand equity they have, the more users they have. So it's just two components. And actually, Tigis, the market is part of the brand equity, product quality piece, right? Because they once the fact that they have such a great product and it gives them such a great brand, that allows them to continue to get more users, and then the cycle goes around and around. I'm sure if we did this as a group in a room for more than an hour, we will have other elements that will show up, like we saw with the Google thing, right? They might have great distribution channels. They might have a monopoly. Honestly, they don't actually, but they could have a monopoly, right? In their markets. So this is it's a good exercise, to have. And even as we continue to talk, I'll bring up Flywheel so that people think about it. But these are some of the things that also help you in discovery. Is okay, what would be the components of our flywheels? All right. And I use Akabanga sauce because we can all relate. Some of us like chili sauce, some of us don't, but we all know what chili sauce is. Okay. So Tawanda, good point, and thank you for bringing that up. I took a note to actually develop our flywheel content so that everybody can absorb that. So thank you. All right. Any other questions? Thoughts, comments?
So Chide, I'll add on there to say maybe culture also becomes one of the points there. I've observed this, and when you mention this, it reminds me of this herb that most Somalis chew every other minute. Most Somalis, I don't know if there's Somalian on the call, but I observed this when I was in Dubai. And I think I met when I came to Kenya the guy was driving me around was also from Somalia. And then he actually explained to me that, this herb is like, I don't know, it's like someone who's addicted to cigarettes, the way that they chew that herb, and it's almost used by maybe 8 out of 10 people. So I think culture is also at the center of the success of this Rwandese sauce or chili sauce, so to say. I don't know if culture can be part of the flywheel, and I think I'm getting ideas of how we can also then develop our own internally as well.
Yeah, so I think you're starting to get into, again, it's almost like, one funny thing about Kabanga sauce is, Rwandans are not very spice oriented. They don't eat a lot of spice. They'll tell you, number one, if you hung out with them. So culturally, I don't know if that is, I don't know. That's a good point, but I think if it's strong enough to drive, see, that's the thing. You're trying to make sure that the flywheel keeps going and maybe even going faster and faster and faster. And so I'm challenged to see if for this particular situation, if that is part of it, right? But that's a good one to think about. That's a good one. And on the continent, actually, culture is can be part of your flywheel in many cases, All right. Well, unless there's nothing else, Andrew, I'm going to shut it down. I think that this is a good session for me to kind of go off on. Yes, somebody wanted to speak?
Yeah, just this is Edward.
Edward, go ahead.
Are there situations where the flywheel effect takes the prices up as opposed to reducing prices?
Listen, Edward, you and I know that raising prices is one of the fastest ways to kill your business, especially if you're in an environment that's price sensitive. And unfortunately, insurance is absolutely a very price sensitive environment. If it's, I would even say, just dangerous, right? So is there a case where raising prices, like prices are raised because of the flywheel? Yes, that's possible. It is possible, but it depends on if you're in a monopoly or a duopoly or something. Even a duopoly, it's hard to raise prices in a duopoly. But a monopoly, yes, the government can say we're raising prices on, the price of getting a visa, not a visa, a driver's license. Nobody can compete with them, right? Like so the fact that maybe they've built greater technology, there's more people looking for driver's licenses, the roads are much better, and so more cars are on the road, and so because of that, people are asking for driver's licenses, and because of that, they increase the price. Yes, there's situations where that can happen, but
yeah, but Chide,
yes.
Sorry to, yeah, I'm not getting that part. I think if your flying wheel is spinning so fast, it's actually a positive that in most cases, people would think price is not a deciding factor. So the price discussion falls away. And I've seen this, I observed just a few months ago that Gmail is starting to charge, for space, which it never used to. But then I'm thinking, hang on, half the time my inbox is full of advertisements. And yet these guys are getting money from advertisements, and they're also getting money from me to pay for my storage. So, but I think it's a matter that Yahoo is dead, Hotmail is not so good. So Gmail ends up being more like, so the flying wheel for them is spinning so fast that the price discussion just falls away. So I wouldn't really think that it's a negative, so as to say the price goes up. It goes up because one is so good at it. It doesn't really, come because of resources or cost, or actually it will just be profiteering throughout. That's how I view, how prices then sometimes end up going up.
Yeah, so Tawanda, the Gmail, so that, look, great point, which is, you could, raising prices is not something that is unique in anywhere from, people, most of my subscriptions, the prices went up. In fact, I use Claude. I use Claude for some of my stuff, and Claude just increased prices. They just, or they didn't even increase prices. They reduced what I'm paying for now. They reduced the benefit and took some of those benefits to a higher tier. So if I want to get those benefits I used to get, I now have to pay more. And in many cases, people just pay for it because they're used to it. So yeah, there are ways to raise prices. But the point that I was making was, especially when you're in a price-sensitive environment, right? And Gmail, the reason that Gmail, the Gmail example is tough is because, at the end of the day, people they're just using the free product, right? They are. It's only when they want to, as you said, they want to start adding what you will call other Google products. Storage is not a Gmail product. It is a Google product, right? Apple likes to do this thing where they'll, you have your phone, but you have all these things on your phone. So they sell storage to you, right? To use, to save your photos and things like that. So I don't know if I would, one product's benefit being used by the company to now offer another product and raise prices on that product. I don't know if that's you raising prices on the original product. So I think that's the point that I wanted to make is Gmail will always be Gmail. If Google ever came up and said, we're going to start charging you for Gmail, they will lose maybe 3/4 of their customers, right? But if you're saying that the what you'll call the value adds, that's what we say on the continent, right? The value adds like storage or what else? Even access to Gemini, right? So that's another thing. Those are different products, right? And they definitely could help Gmail, or Gmail may help them, but I don't necessarily think that's part of their flywheel. But I get your point. You know what, Edward? The answer to your question is yes. Prices could increase, could be part of your flywheel momentum. Is increased prices. That's fine. I don't think that's an issue. All right. Any other questions? That was a good one, the price question. Any questions on prioritization, viability, value, feasibility, usability, first principles?
Just a comment or a question, Chidi.
Yes, Talent.
Yeah, one of the biggest issues is how do you judge usability, feasibility, and viability as a startup. And what I've seen as well is that a lot of startups, they aim for perfection before they bring a product to the market. So is there a thing like prototyping too early or bringing a product to the market too early? Because for me, I think you learn the most about the usability, feasibility when you bring the product to the customer and they are using it. And probably you can iterate and improve on it while it's on the market. So is there a thing like, too much perfectionism or maybe prototyping or going to the market too early? How do you strike a balance?
Yeah, this is Discovery 101, right? And I think I shared this with you in the first session where we said that what happens is, many folks try to get every feature and make it perfect before they go to market. And many times even that perfection doesn't involve the customer. It's the founders and the teams. We have our ideas, right? This is what will make it perfect. You don't let your customer come into contact until it's perfect. And many times your customer is like, what is this? You know, I don't know how many of you, you know, I'm aging myself, but I remember when I first got Facebook, the Facebook that you're using today and the Facebook that we got, and I wasn't even what you would call a prototype customer. I wasn't, because remember that they started at Harvard University. That was the first place where they started prototyping. Mark Zuckerberg. But the one I saw, you know, when I was using it, it was, oh, okay, this is interesting. The product you see today, nothing like it. Same thing with WhatsApp. You know, everybody is using WhatsApp now. We're doing status and we're doing, you know, calls. And no, I was one of the first users of WhatsApp when it first launched. WhatsApp was just text back and forth. It was a texting platform. That's it. Nothing like what you see today with the users and phone calls and everything. Twitter. I remember when Twitter first started. Twitter was, in fact, I don't know if there's a website that will show you the original versions of the products that we know and love today. Gmail, same thing. Okay. Microsoft Office. You know, if you go and look at M-Pesa, the first version of M-Pesa compared to what it is today, nothing like it. There's no such thing as perfection. You just go there and you just hit the customer as soon as possible. If they tell you it's ugly, it's unusable, you know what? Go and fix that. But at the core is it solving the problem? And once it's solving your problem, you keep going, you keep iterating. So if you're there chasing perfection, why would you chase perfection? You're chasing solving the problem. They're already using something that has tape and, as we say in Nigeria, chewing gum. You use chewing gum, tape, you know, plaster. They're already doing that, right? Because it's solving the problem. It is alleviating a pain point that is causing serious wahala for them. So that would be my. There's no such thing as perfect. Please launch. That's why we call it prototyping. That's why we call it, you know, a test. Most of the products that you used when you first made contact with them was a test. If you're one of the original customers, it was a test. They use, you know, can I give you a great example? Uber. I was one of the original customers of Uber, and this was somewhere, there was a conference in southern US, somewhere in the US, and we got this app called Uber, and Uber said, ride like an executive. That was the thing. This is one of the biggest tech conferences in the world. You go to the event and they're saying, instead of taking a taxi, you can actually ride like an executive. We have these limousines that are available to you to use. So we go there and we start trying to get these limos. Do you know, it was very difficult to get a limo. Oh, you know what? Let's use Uber. Let's see if we can get this Uber. Barely. It will take an hour to get to you, 2 hours. Meanwhile, it will take me 20 minutes to walk to where I need to go. So I'll walk and then I'll try again and try again. It was not usable. But do you know what happened? That was a test. We're testing whether people whether the model could get to you. That wasn't the test. The test was, were people interested? And the fact that so many of us, hundreds of thousands of us, were mashing the app saying, where's the limo? Where's the limo? That told them, oh, so people want to do this. That was one test. On the back end, there was another test that they were doing to see if limo drivers who had these cars that were just laying around, they would pick up Tawanda, you know, Oga Tawanda. They will take him to the airport, drop him, and then they have 4 hours where nobody's using them. So Uber comes and says, can you, those 4 hours, we can monetize that for you. Are you interested in that? The limo driver will say, sure. How do they test that? By giving them an app. Oh, I have 4 hours. Now you can book for whatever person that wants it. That's testing. It was very terrible, the first app. But they got what they needed. And they got my attention. They got our attention. Everybody talks about Uber today. Okay. I don't know if that helps.
So I think, actually, I'm happy that we pulled through until the 2 hours. I was worried that, you know, you would go away with the wrong impression today. But I'll also add on to say, I think we need to learn from COVID-19. You know, the bioscientific, the biomedical world is also changing. the time it takes to develop, medicines, vaccines, virals, and all of that. Learning from COVID, so everybody now is saying this is doable, because before you know it, the variants of a certain disease has changed. So sometimes if you seek for perfection, the environment at which what inspired the initial innovation probably would have changed. And we are living in a very fast changing world where it's very easy for products to go extinct before even they are launched. So I would say I'll concur with Chide to say, go for it. Launch products and then on the go, because that's the only way we were going to learn. So I agree with that point. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Tawanda. All right, everyone. I'm glad we did make it to 2 hours. The interaction at the end was was welcome. I thought it was going to be a quiet session, but I'm glad we picked it up. So thank you for your attention, and we got through the material. For one time, I didn't have to delete any slides or skip anything, so this is good. So all right, well, thank you, and we shall be talking soon. Andrew, I don't know if you have any announcements, but that's my time.
Thank you, Dee. That was a good session. I liked the interaction towards the end, and I hope we can be more interactive from the beginning. But I don't think I have any updates. I've given all my updates via WhatsApp. Concerning the Zambia travel, mentorship, chemistry calls, and also for the cohort to set up one-on-one calls with you, Chidi. So I think I am good to go on that.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of the week, okay?
Thank you, Chidi.
Thanks, Chidi. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.